It began with a phone call from a lonely lighthouse keeper named John. His voice trembled as he spoke. He had been working on an isolated lighthouse for 6 months on a tiny island surrounded by endless ocean. For nearly 2 months, every single night at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, someone knocked on his door. 3 slow knocks, always the same, every night. Every time he opened the door, there was no one there. No footsteps, no footprints, no voice. Nothing except the freezing ocean wind.
She sees the hidden shadows, the spark behind the flame.
My name is Samantha. For as long as I can remember, meditation has been a part of my life. When my mind becomes completely still, I sometimes sense echoes that do not belong to this world. I don't summon spirits, they find me. Some seek justice, some seek forgiveness. Others simply want someone to hear the story they were never able to finish. Every investigation changes me. Some leave behind fear, others leave behind questions with no easy answers. Today's case did both. It began with a phone call from a lonely lighthouse keeper named John. His voice trembled as he spoke. He had been working on an isolated lighthouse for 6 months on a tiny island surrounded by endless ocean. During the day, tourists visited the island, climbed the lighthouse, admired the breathtaking view, and returned home before sunset. But once darkness fell, the island belonged only to John, the crashing waves, and silence. Or so he thought. For nearly 2 months, every single night at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, someone knocked on his door. 3 slow knocks, always the same, every night. Every time he opened the door, there was no one there. No footsteps, no footprints, no voice. Nothing except the freezing ocean wind. At first, he believed someone was playing a cruel prank. Then he searched the entire lighthouse, then the shoreline, then every building on the island. He never found anyone. Finally, after weeks of sleepless nights, someone gave him my number. I reached the island by ferry just before sunset. The farther we sailed from the mainland, the quieter the world became. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction. The lighthouse stood alone atop black cliffs, its bright beams sweeping across the darkening ocean like a giant eye searching the horizon. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks echoed through the island. Seagulls circled above. The salty wind carried an uneasy feeling that I couldn't explain. John welcomed me warmly. He was in his early 30s, soft-spoken, and lived there with his wife. During the day, they greeted visitors with smiles. At night, they dreaded the sound of knocking. The first night passed peacefully. Nothing happened. My meditation revealed only silence. The second night, however, changed everything. The second evening on the island felt very different. I cannot explain it with logic. Some places seem to have a heartbeat of their own. The lighthouse was one of them. As the last ferry disappeared beyond the horizon, silence slowly took over the island. The laughter of tourists vanished with it. Even the seagulls seemed to abandon the cliffs before darkness settled in. John locked the heavy wooden entrance. "The island belongs to us now," he said with an uneasy smile. I looked through the window. Beyond the lighthouse, there was nothing, only endless ocean. The sea was unusually calm, yet something about that silence made me uncomfortable. Every few minutes, the lighthouse beams swept across the black water, revealing nothing except rolling waves before everything disappeared into darkness again. There were no neighboring houses, no roads, no passing cars, no distant city lights, just the sound of the ocean breathing around the island. As the night grew deeper, the wind became stronger. It rushed through tiny openings in the old stone walls, producing strange whistles that sounded almost like someone whispering from another room. John noticed me listening. "You'll hear many strange sounds here," he said quietly. "After a while, you stop asking where they're coming from." But I wasn't convinced. Some sounds belong to nature. Others feel as if they belong to memory. Around midnight, I climbed the spiral staircase alone. Every step echoed inside the massive stone tower. The staircase seemed endless. The higher I climbed, the colder the air became. My flashlight illuminated ancient walls scarred by decades of storms. Rust covered the iron railings. Small patches of moss clung to the damp stone. Every few steps, I found faded scratches carved into the wall by people whose names had long been forgotten. For a brief moment, I stopped. I felt as though someone had climbed the stairs only seconds before me. I quickly turned around. No one. Only darkness stretching downward. Yet the strange sensation remained, the feeling of not being alone. I continued toward the observation deck. The wind struck me immediately. It was so powerful that I had to hold on to the railing. Below me, gigantic waves crashed against the cliffs with enough force to shake the lighthouse itself. Every impact echoed through the stone tower like distant thunder. The beam of light slowly rotated above my head. Every few seconds, the island would be swallowed by darkness, then illuminated again, then swallowed once more. Standing there, I understood why sailors had feared lonely lighthouses for centuries. Isolation changes the way the human mind interprets silence. Eventually, I returned downstairs. John had prepared hot coffee. Neither of us spoke much. We simply waited. The old wall clock continued its slow march toward 3 in the morning. 2:47, 2:53, 2:58, every second seemed louder than the one before. At exactly 3 a.m., knock. One slow knock. Not loud, not violent, just enough to freeze every thought in my mind. John's eyes met mine instantly. "There," he whispered. Another knock. 3 slow taps, as though someone was standing patiently outside, waiting for permission to enter. I checked every monitor connected to my investigation equipment. The electromagnetic readings suddenly climbed higher than anything I had recorded since arriving on the island. The air inside the room became noticeably colder. My breath was visible, yet all the windows were closed. The knocking continued. Slow, patient, never hurried, never angry. Almost polite. John's hands were shaking. "This is exactly how it happens," he whispered. "Every single night." I slowly walked toward the door. Each footstep felt heavier than the last. The old wooden floor creaked beneath my boots. The final knock came just as I reached the handle. Silence followed. Complete silence. I wrapped one hand around the silver cross hanging from my neck, while the other slowly turned the doorknob. The hinges groaned as the door opened. A blast of freezing sea air rushed inside. The lantern hanging outside swayed violently. The light flickered. Beyond the doorway, nothing. No footprints, no visitor, no shadow. Only the dark ocean and the endless sound of waves crashing below. But then, I noticed something impossible. The thick sea mist drifting across the path suddenly divided into the outline of a human figure. It remained visible for only a heartbeat, a pale shadow, standing perfectly still. Before I could react, the lighthouse beam swept across the entrance. The figure disappeared instantly. Only mist remained. Behind me, one of my sensors emitted a sharp warning tone. Another. Then another. Every device briefly detected the same unexplained energy before falling silent again. Whatever had been there had already left. I closed the door slowly. John was pale. "I've heard those knocks for months," he said softly. "Tonight is the first time I felt someone standing outside." Neither of us slept for the rest of the night. Instead, I remained seated in meditation until dawn. As the first rays of sunlight entered the room, the oppressive heaviness that had filled the lighthouse simply vanished. It was as though the building itself had awakened from a terrible dream. That was the moment I realized something important. Whatever spirit was reaching out to us wasn't trying to frighten anyone. It was trying, desperately, to be heard. That morning, I meditated again. At first, everything was darkness. Then, fragmented images appeared. A luxurious home, a wealthy family, a hospital bed, a young woman around 20 years old lying in bed. Her name was Sia. She suffered from a rare autoimmune illness that caused relentless pain. Every day was agony. Every movement hurt. Specialists had exhausted every available treatment, and her condition continued to worsen. She had accepted that she would never recover. The only person who stayed beside her day and night was her caregiver, Mary. Mary was more than a nurse. She became the mother Sia needed during the darkest chapter of her life. Every night, Sia begged Mary to help end her suffering. Mary refused, again and again. She believed her duty was to preserve life. But as weeks became months, she watched Sia endure unimaginable pain. Eventually, overwhelmed by compassion and despair, Mary crossed a line she had sworn never to cross. She secretly increased Sia's medication beyond the prescribed amount. Not all at once, slowly, carefully. Within 3 months, Sia peacefully passed away. Her final words to Mary were filled with gratitude. She believed she had finally been freed from endless suffering. But Mary was not. After Sia's death, guilt consumed her. She questioned every decision she had made. Had she shown compassion or committed an unforgivable act? She could no longer answer that question. Unable to live with the burden, she disappeared. In my vision, I watched her arrive alone at this very lighthouse as a tourist. Late one stormy night, she climbed to the very top. She looked out across the endless sea, closed her eyes, and stepped into the darkness below. Her body was never recovered. Her family searched for months before she was eventually declared missing. No one ever discovered what had happened, but her spirit remained trapped on this lonely island. Every night, she knocked upon the keeper's door, not to frighten anyone, but hoping that someone would finally hear her story. The next morning, I shared everything with John and his wife. Together, we climbed to the top of the lighthouse. There, overlooking the endless ocean, we held a quiet memorial for Mary. John spoke words of forgiveness. His wife placed white flowers near the railing. I closed my eyes and prayed for peace, not only for Mary, but for Sia as well. As the first rays of sunrise crossed the sea, the heavy feeling surrounding the lighthouse disappeared. That night, there were no knocks, only the sound of the waves. Weeks later, John told me that the fear had completely vanished. Soon afterward, he requested a transfer to another lighthouse, carrying with him a story he would never forget. As I returned home, one question stayed with me. When someone is suffering beyond imagination, where does compassion end? And where does responsibility begin? Is mercy killing ethical? I don't claim to know the answer. Perhaps that is why this case will always remain the dilemma. A few days later, my phone rang again. Another voice, another impossible mystery, another soul waiting to be heard. My next investigation is coming soon.
Beyond the sixth sense. Samantha closes her eyes, slow breath, sitting still in the dark. She can feel them, cold air, sudden chill. Beyond the sixth sense. She knows, she knows. Beyond the sixth sense, where every secret flows. Beyond the sixth. Beyond the sixth. Beyond the sixth sense. She feels them drawing near. Samantha Beyond the sixth sense. Beyond the sixth sense.